Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right in. Today, we're unpacking a really powerful narrative from our source material that tackles a struggle I think we all face: managing our time. It's a fascinating story that perfectly illustrates how our everyday, seemingly tiny choices about when to take action can just completely alter the trajectory of our lives. We're going to break down this tale, look at the key moments of decision, and pull out the deep psychological lessons hidden inside. To kick things off, I want you to ask yourself a pretty heavy question. Is the phrase, "I'll do it tomorrow," quietly ruining your future? Because the story we're exploring today revolves entirely around this deadly trap. In the source material, it's called kalkarlenge, which literally translates to, "we'll do it tomorrow." It's this comforting little lie we tell ourselves, right? But as we're about to see, this specific mindset isn't just some harmless, quirky habit. It's actually a slow-acting poison to our potential. The text uses a beautifully crafted allegory to show us exactly how this one phrase destroys opportunity.
Part 1. Two villages, two friends. Let's start by looking at the macro-level stakes established right at the beginning of the story. So the narrative sets up this incredibly stark environmental contrast. On one hand, we have Suvarngram. The text describes it as a prosperous city surrounded by fields and rivers, where the people are unbelievably hardworking and strictly punctual. Plows are running in the fields at dawn, shops open super early, and the result, absolute prosperity. But just a short distance away is a place called Alasiapur, and here the culture is entirely defined by that toxic phrase we just talked about. Why hurry today? We'll do it tomorrow. The work isn't running away. And because of this constant delayed maintenance and just a collective failure to plant crops on time, Alasiapur is sinking into deep poverty and decay. It's a perfect setup to show us that time management doesn't just affect individuals, it literally builds or breaks entire communities.
Now, zooming in on Alasiapur, we meet our two central figures. First up is Nalan. He is hardworking, punctual, and highly visionary. He genuinely understands that every single moment holds value. And because of that mindset, his farm is clean and fertile, and his house is sturdy. Then we have his friend, Bajrak. Bajrak is basically the human embodiment of his village's culture. He's careless, constantly delaying things, and always thinking he can just do it tomorrow. The source specifically notes that his farm is choked with weeds and his house is falling apart, simply because he completely refuses to act in the present moment.
Part 2. The merchant's opportunity. This brings us to the very first major test our characters face. So, a merchant arrives in the village and announces he'll be back in exactly 2 days to buy grain and goods at a premium price. When Nalan hears this, he takes immediate, organized action. He doesn't wait around. He goes straight to his field, cuts the ripe crop, dries it in the sun, cleans it thoroughly, and packs it all up into sacks. He even takes the time to go warn his friend Bajrak about this awesome opportunity. You see, Nalan treats that 2-day deadline not as an excuse to relax, but as the exact time frame he needs to execute a really high-quality job.
But here is the absolutely crucial point. How does Bajrak respond to the exact same opportunity? Well, with a dismissive laugh and his dangerous little catchphrase. Even after being directly warned by his friend that opportunities don't just knock over and over again, Bajrak chooses comfort. He literally just sits under a tree to rest, telling Nalan he's always in too much of a hurry. He entirely confuses the availability of time with the luxury of inaction. And wow, the consequences of this first test are immediate. 2 days later, the merchant comes back. Nalan's pristine grain earns him a massive profit. But when the merchant gets to Bajrak's place, he finds only wet, half-rotting grain that he flat-out refuses to buy, pointing out it would just cause him a loss. Left totally empty-handed, Bajrak visits Nalan that night, full of regret. And after Nalan secures his profit while his friend gets nothing, Nalan delivers this really profound piece of wisdom. He says, "Time is a flowing water. If you haven't tried to hold it, it slips from your hands." It's such a beautiful metaphor from our source text, highlighting the active effort you actually need to capture the value of the present. But the author doesn't stop at just a missed financial opportunity. If we look at the timeline of delay here, the tests are about to get significantly more severe. We just covered the merchant's return after 2 days, but look at what's looming on the horizon: a forest fire months later and a severe famine a year later. The whole story is structurally designed to show us that chronic procrastination eventually threatens your very survival. Part 3. The test of fire. This is where the stakes escalate from a simple financial loss to actual physical danger. During the summer, a massive forest fire threatens the village. Whipped up by strong winds, Nalan immediately rallies the villagers to throw water, warning everyone that the fire is going to consume their homes. Being proactive, he builds a wet mud barrier completely around his house, securing the perimeter. And Radrik? Incredibly, he looks at the approaching danger and actually says, "The fire is still far away. We'll see tomorrow." I mean, it's wild. And the contrasting results are just stark and devastating. By nightfall, the fire reaches the edge of the village. Nolan's home stands perfectly safe behind its mud barrier. But Brodrock's house, it's burned entirely to ashes, leaving him in absolute shock. His procrastination has literally cost him his shelter.
Part 4. The King's Festival. Now, despite this terrible tragedy, the story introduces a massive chance for redemption.
The king of Suvarngram announces a huge festival, promising wealth and a high royal position to whoever presents the best, most useful item. Nolan, staying true to form, springs into immediate action. He heads straight into the forest, sources some incredibly fine wood, and dedicates all his time to crafting this beautiful wooden cradle. When the day of the festival finally arrives, the king is just blown away, not only by the craftsmanship, but by Nolan's punctuality and sheer dedication. Because he acted while he actually had the time, Nolan is appointed the royal treasurer of Suvarngram. He essentially secures his future right then and there. On the flip side, Bodrick's whole "I'll do it later" mentality turns him into a mere spectator to his friend's massive success. He heard the exact same royal announcement as Nolan did, but predictably, he figured there was plenty of time and delayed putting in any effort. So when the festival kicks off, he has literally nothing to present. He's just left standing there in the crowd, totally empty-handed, watching Nolan rise to immense power and wealth. The source is really highlighting a harsh reality here. The world absolutely does not pause its rewards for those who pause their efforts.
Part 5. The Parrot and the Crow. Here, Nolan tries to help his friend finally understand the fatal flaw in his logic.
Nolan decides to tell Bodrick a little parable about two birds right before the rainy season hits. There's a proactive parrot who works super hard while the weather is good, gathering up leaves and wood to reinforce his nest. Then there's the crow, who looks around and says, "The weather is so nice right now, why work?" and totally delays his preparations. Naturally, when the heavy rains inevitably pour down, the parrot is dry, comfortable, and totally safe. But the crow's nest collapses, leaving him soaked and shivering in the storm. Nolan explicitly points out to Bodrick that someone who doesn't value time is acting exactly like that shivering crow. Now, you'd think Bodrick would finally get the message here, right? But instead, he replies, "Yes, from tomorrow, I will change." The source notes that Nolan just smiles at this tragic response. And why? Because he knows a really harsh truth. Tomorrow never comes. Bodrick is so deeply fundamentally wired to defer his life to the future that he's even deferring his own self-improvement to a day that literally doesn't exist. He is just completely caught in an endless loop of delay. Part 6. Time is a river. And this brings us to the climax of the narrative, 1 full year later. The rains fail entirely. The crops dry up. A devastating famine hits Elias Sapor. Because the crops failed and there was zero rain, anyone who hadn't prepared ahead of time faced total, absolute ruin. Nolan, who always prepared ahead of time, has a full store of grain and water. Not only does he survive, but he's able to generously help others in the village. Meanwhile, Bodrick, who never prepared his life or prepared for the future, is left hungry, sick, and entirely dependent on Nolan's charity. As he lies there sick, Bodrick finally, painfully admits that he learned the value of time way too late. As Nolan gives his sick friend a drink of water, he delivers the story's ultimate resolving metaphor. He says, "Time is like a river. Once it flows past, it never returns. Its proper use is the real success of life." The story uses this imagery just perfectly. You can't step in the same river twice, and you definitely can't get back those precious hours you spent sitting under a tree when you really should have been preparing for the winter or the fire or the famine. According to the source material, success isn't just about hard work. It is inextricably tied to the timely application of that work. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you to reflect on a pretty crucial question from the parable we just went over. Take a hard look at your own habits, your own delayed projects, your unfulfilled goals. Who are you right now? The parrot or the crow? Are you actively preparing your nest while the weather is good, or are you constantly telling yourself you'll just do it tomorrow? Let's stop waiting for a tomorrow that never comes and take action today. Thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer, and I will see you next time.